Okay, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I apologize to those of you in the room who are hearing an echo right now. When I'm not talking, that won't happen. But for those of you who are joining us by Zoom, welcome. I encourage you to use the chat function if you need to get my attention for anything. I will have my mic muted throughout the meeting, but ask that everyone keep your mics muted and your video turned off. And then one thing to note is that if I switch the system over to one of the other inputs, you will have a temporary loss in what you hear or see. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and mute my mic so that the meeting can progress.
This meeting is being recorded.
Okay, Mr. Mayor, we are ready to proceed.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for all of you who chose to show up this evening for the first City Council meeting we've had in these chambers in about 8 weeks. Appreciate you all making the effort to come here. And we'll go ahead and begin. I'll call this meeting to order. Note for the record that all members of City Council are present and accounted for. And as usual, we will stand and say the Pledge of Allegiance. So please join me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I have to say it is really nice to be able to stand here in front of that flag for the first time in 8 weeks. It's been a long time. So the first item up on tonight's agenda is the consent agenda. On the consent agenda, we have 3 items. First item is the council meeting minutes from the meeting of May 4th, 2020. Second item is the financial management report, month ending March 31st, 2020. Third item is alcoholic beverage license applications for PH-20-AB-05, Movie Grill Concepts 20XX111 LLC, DBA Studio Movie Grill at North Point Parkway. Is there anyone who would like to remove anything from council's consent agenda this evening? Seeing none, I'll call for a motion.
Motion to approve. Second.
We have a motion by Mayor Pro Tem Donald Mitchell and a second by Councilman Burnett. And for the first time in 8 weeks, I do not have to call roll. Please, if you will grab your little duty, press yes or no to approve the motion. It's a little rusty. So let's try again. There we go. Everybody lock in your vote, please. Councilman Merkel. Councilman Merkel. And we thought we had trouble with Zoom. There we go. And the motion does pass unanimously. So we'll move on to the new business portion of tonight's agenda. And the first item up on the new business agenda is item A, intergovernmental agreement, IGA, with Roswell regarding Menzel Road Bridge ownership and maintenance. Director Sisevich, you have the floor.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Before tonight it's a no-cost item for me. I haven't had that in a while. So basically, what we're doing, we're cleaning some things up with Roswell.
Hello.
Mansell Road over Big Creek has two bridges, traveling eastbound and westbound. Southbound bridge, which takes on the eastbound traffic, is in the city limits of Roswell. So Roswell's going to take care of that bridge, and then it's a whole separate bridge taking the westbound traffic on Mansell Road, and that would be in our city limits, so we'll be taking care of that. Right now, the property, the two city limits traverse right through the two bridges. So instead of one city taking care of half and the other one taking another half, we decided we'll take care of the northern half and Roswell will take care of the southern half. And Roswell has already approved their IGA.
Thank you, sir. Do we have any questions from council on this item? I just have one question for you. Since there wasn't a diagram in our package, which one is the east and which one is the west?
So the southbound bridge, the southern bridge,
Right.
takes care of the westbound traffic, eastbound traffic.
Okay.
The northern bridge, which would be us, who takes care of the westbound traffic.
I was just curious. Thank you.
Yes.
All right, if there are no other questions from
Can
council.
anyone hear? Is everyone on mute? Why? Why are you? Why?
It's gonna be a fun night.
That's okay. We're back at home. So,
I don't think the meeting has started yet.
can you just turn down the
Actually, the
volume?
meeting has started. There seems to be an audio problem coming out. You can watch it online, and this will work for comments, but we're trying to take a look at it.
There we go. Yeah, I've got it set to where they can't do that. Sorry, everybody.
No worries, man. We're just shaking off the dust, learning to adapt to the new realities. We good to go now?
Yes.
Okay. So if we have no other questions from council, Ms. Cobb, do we have any public comment cards on this item?
No, sir, we do not.
Thank you, ma'am. But if there's anyone who wants to come speak about the intergovernmental agreement over the bridges on Mansell, now's your opportunity to do so. Seeing no one, we'll close public comment. Do I have a motion from council?
Yes, sir, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to ask the council to please approve the IGA with the city of Roswell for the maintenance responsibility regarding Mansell Road bridges adjacent to the city limits of Alpharetta and Roswell, and authorize the mayor to execute all necessary documents.
We once again have a motion by Mayor Pro Tem Mitchell and a second by Councilman Hypes, I believe it was. Any discussion on this item?
Pete, thank you for formalizing this. This has already been in process, and so it's just a formal agreement that we're already maintaining our bridge and they're maintaining theirs, so it's just something that you had to do. Is that correct?
Yes.
All right.
Thanks, sir.
Thank you for your leadership on that.
Seeing no other comments, I'll go ahead and call for a vote on the motion. All those in favor of approving the IGA for the bridges on Mansell Road with Roswell, the city of Roswell, please vote yes. Otherwise, please vote no. Councilman Hypes, I need you to vote again, please, sir.
Thank you, Mayor and Council.
You voted yes. It does pass unanimously. Thank you, sir. Second item up on tonight's business agenda is, new business agenda is the refresh of data center equipment. Director of IT, Randy Bunden, you do have the floor now, sir. You'll be joining us by Zoom.
Randy, can you hear us? Randy? Randy?
I know he's out there because I saw him a minute ago.
I was just thinking that. Okay, Randy? Keeps it to himself. Randy, you are unmuted. Please proceed. Yes. Here or not here? Why is that fine? Because we don't have here. Sorry, I have two different computers. When I muted everything, it caused us problems. Bob, you want to take over for Randy real quick, because I'm not going to get him up in time. Randy, I apologize. I'm not using the sheet here. When I had to mute everybody, it's caused problems. Bob.
He has it.
Bob is presenting
Mayor and Council, before you here is the annual refresh of data center equipment for the city. Core components, including servers, production storage, core network switches. The total amount is $178,755.74. We're using the Georgia statewide contract. So that is before you tonight. And if you have any questions, I'll be happy to try to answer them.
Thanks, sir. Do we have any questions from council? I believe Mr. Bundy may be able to answer them through chat if Bob can't pick up and refer to any of the questions. But do we have any questions? I'm seeing none from council. Ms. Cobb, do we have any people in the audience who have asked to speak on this item?
We do not, sir.
Thank you, ma'am. Then we'll go ahead and close public comment. Do I have a motion from council?
Yes, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to make a motion to award the contract to Dell EMC as the vendor to provide data center components, including servers, storage, and network switches in an amount not to exceed $178,755.74. And that'll be utilizing the Georgia State contract, and this will authorize the mayor to execute all necessary documents.
We have a motion by Councilman Burnett, second by Councilman Merkel. Any discussion on this item? I'd just like to note for the record that because our IT department has been moving much of our computing capacity into the cloud, we have reduced the financial capital investments that we're having to make in these. It would have otherwise been much more expensive. So we do appreciate Randy and his staff working hard to not only provide IT services for a city that's working from home for the most part, but to do it more efficiently and saving taxpayers' dollars as well. So thank you all. That being said, if there's no other comments, I'll go ahead and call for a vote on the motion. The motion is to approve the refresh of data center equipment and the competitive bid in an amount for Dell EMC as the vendor in an amount up to $178,755.74. All those in favor of that motion, please vote yes. Otherwise, vote no. And it does pass unanimously. So next item up on our agenda this evening is the Development Authority Revenue Bond Application Additions. Sponsor was Councilman Burnett, and Do we have Matthew Thomas available on Zoom?
$55.74. All those in favor?
There's a little bit of a delay.
Otherwise vote no. And it does pass unanimously.
I bet it passes.
So next item up on our agenda this evening is the Development Authority Revenue Bond Application Additions. Sponsor was Councilman Burnett. And do we have Matthew Thomas available on Zoom?
Yes, sir. Mayor, can you hear me?
All those in favor?
I can hear you, sir.
Otherwise vote no. And it does pass unanimously.
Can you hear me?
I bet it passes.
Matthew, we can hear you.
Can you hear me?
Councilman Burnett and
Hello?
Matthew Thomas available on Zoom.
Mayor and council, can you hear me?
I can hear you, but you won't hear this for 3
Good
minutes.
evening to you all. Before you is,
Can you hear me?
before you is a modified version of the Development Authority's revenue bond application. This item was first presented at the May 4th council meeting for your input. Regarding questions 8 and 9.
I can hear you, but you won't hear those.
This is a modified version of the Development Authority's revenue bond application.
Mr.
The
Regas,
goal of these questions are to help facilitate corporate social responsibility and ensure applicant.
There's too much of a delay between here and there.
that theory of relativity, it always is a catch.
Yes.
Mr. Thomas, do you mind, as city attorney, addressing this
Following
issue?
up, I can't see you as well as I might, but I'll fill in for Matthew on this. As you know, this was sponsored by, well, I'm looking at him, it says Dan Merkel, but I know it's Ben Burnett. And it's to revise the application for the Development Authority tax abatement bonds. And there are 2 revised questions. And generally, the intent, and this came before you in a workshop, is to give businesses that are coming in an opportunity to be part of the community, things that they, ask them what they might be interested in. We're finding that a lot of people are receptive to that. They want to find something where they can contribute, in addition just to bringing their business here. So I think this is, to the best of my knowledge, is pretty much the same as it was presented last week, but I'll let Ben, if you have any comments on that.
Thank you, Sam.
Okay. Well, we would submit this for your approval.
Thank you, sir. Do we have any questions from council on this item? Seeing none, Ms. Cobb, do we have any public comment cards on this item?
We do not, sir.
Thank you, ma'am. So we'll go ahead and close public comment. Do I have a motion from council?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I would like to recommend that we approve the addition to the Development Authority's revenue bond application.
Second.
We have a motion by Councilman Burnett and a second by Councilman Merkel. Any discussion? Councilman Burnett, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The intent behind this was to try to show, as we walk into a season of uncertainty with some of the growth that has stopped and some of the partners here that create jobs and applications, are ways to knowingly have to wander through the process with the city of Alpharetta to be able to look out for the public school system and to find ways to be involved there, and also to be able to invest in the rec programs, arts initiatives, things of that nature, so that most of the people who come here desire to be a part of the community, and so to be able to leverage that and in turn potentially find alternate funding sources for activities and programs that are important to them corporately as well as the city's residents is really the intent here. So I just want to thank everybody as I've kind of put this out there over the course of previous weeks and months for the Development Authority, all their feedback, the staff, and then each of you who's chosen to comment in a work session and send me emails otherwise. I appreciate the opportunity to do this.
Any other questions or comments from council? All right, that being done, we'll go ahead and call for the vote on the motion of the Development Authority Revenue Bond Application additions. All those in favor of the additions as explained by City Attorney Sam Thomas, please vote yes. Otherwise, please vote no. And it does pass unanimously. Fourth item and final item on tonight's new business agenda is the amendment to alcohol ordinance to allow on-premise sales and consumption in privately owned dog parks. This is the first reading, and it'll be presented by Ms. Cobb and City Attorney Sam Thomas if we have any questions about the legalities, since he actually wrote it. Ms. Cobb, you have the floor.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. The item I have before you tonight is an ordinance amendment that will allow for alcohol to be sold and consumed in privately owned dog parks. In order for a license to be issued, the park must meet the following criteria. The park is located in a minimum of a 2-acre lot within the LI zoning district. The park has a minimum of 25 due-paying members. The park limits its hours of operations between 10 a.m. and 8 p.m. The park derives a minimum of 40% of the total gross food and beverage sales from the sale of prepared food. The park has a full-service kitchen or regularly utilizes one of the food trucks to provide prepared food to meet its food sales requirements. The park has food trucks or other sources of prepared food available for sale during all hours of operations. Staff is recommending that Mayor and Council approve the first reading of the amendment to the City of Alpharetta's alcohol ordinance to allow on-premise sales and consumption in privately owned dog parks. If you have any questions, please let me know. I'd be happy to answer any.
Do we have any questions from council on this item? Councilman Merkel.
Has the applicant reviewed the procedures necessary to calculate food sales when you specifically have food trucks that come and go? Some days you're cooking your own food.
We actually have 2 representatives from Fetch Dog Park, if you'd like them to come forward.
When it's proper for them, I'll ask them.
Oh, sure.
Thanks. I didn't know if they'd presented any of that to you in their recommendation.
Yes, we've gone over back and forth, so they have agreed that they can meet those requirements.
Okay, thanks.
Any other questions from council? Thank you, ma'am. And while you're here, do you know if there's any public comment cards on this item?
Yes.
Mr. Mayor, we have one public comment card from Jessica Plett, 11440 Maxwell Road. I apologize if I've mispronounced that.
Hi, Mr. Mayor and Council. We want to thank you for your time and also for having this item on the agenda today for your review. One of the things that we request revision on is including hours of operation in an alcohol ordinance. And I can
Thank you for your comment.
Okay. So first and foremost, we're a dog park, and like many of the dog parks in the area that are open from sunup to sundown, we hope that we won't be limited to hours of operation within the alcohol ordinance.
That's one of the things that separates us is just, we have lights, we want to be open before sunrise and close after sunset.
You selling alcohol before sunrise?
No, just being open. So
we're a full coffee bar.
We have a full coffee bar. We're fully staffed, so even, in the winter when it's dark at 5 p.m., people can come and we have lights on, and it's safe for people to be there because it is fully staffed.
Okay. And since you're not an applicant and there's typically just a 3-minute period for comments, this is the first reading. There will be an opportunity for us to make some minor changes before the second reading. So I would encourage you to reach back out to our staff and try to address those concerns for the next reading, okay? Thank you. Mr. Drinker, were there any other public comment cards on this item?
No, sir.
Okay, thank you, sir. Thank you, ma'am. We'll close public comment. Do I have a motion from council? Oh, that might be helpful. Mr. Thomas, would you like to read the ordinance? Or at least the title?
Yes, this is an ordinance of the mayor and council of the city of Alpharetta providing for certain amendments to Chapter 3, alcoholic beverages of the Code of the City of Alpharetta, Georgia, to delete, modify, and add certain provisions concerning the sale of alcoholic beverages for consumption on the premises, to provide for regulations governing on-premise consumption for dog parks, to provide for an effective date and for other purposes.
Thank you, sir. Does anyone on council have any questions about the ordinance itself? And if not, then I'll call for a motion.
Mr. Mayor, I'll offer a motion to approve the amendment to the alcohol ordinance to allow on-premise sales and consumption in privately owned dog parks.
Second.
We have a motion by Councilwoman Richard and a second, I believe that was Councilman Binder. Is there any discussion? Councilman Binder.
Yeah, just not to, we don't have to go over it now, but it would make sense. I guess this is kind of a hybrid of having food services like a restaurant and having dogs, so be open to hearing more how staff can work together to make that align, that the hours for alcohol would match what they would have for restaurants, so whether that's 8 or 10. So just interested in hearing more, but I could see the point.
Thanks, sir. Any other comments from council? All right, then I'll go ahead and call for the vote. All those in favor of the motion to approve the amendment to the alcohol ordinance to allow on-premise sales and consumption in privately owned dog parks as read by City Attorney Sam Thomas, please vote yes. Otherwise, vote no. And it does pass unanimously. So that will wrap up tonight's new business agenda, and we'll move on to the workshop items. We have 3 workshop items, and the first of which will be the consideration of an ordinance providing for regulations governing use of skateboards, sponsored by Mayor Pro Tem Mitchell. I believe City Attorney Sam Thomas will be discussing this item.
Yes, thank you. Actually, and I just by way of a little bit of background, I think I may have jumped the gun a little bit in getting it out on an agenda for a first reading. Actually, it was intended to be for a workshop. I know over the last couple of months, certainly before the situation we're dealing with now, we did have a lot of people. We had people that were submitting complaints about some of the skateboarding that was particularly going on in City Center, the noise, and then what was admittedly at times a dangerous situation with the speed of skateboards in the garage coming around the corner in blind spots. So there was a concern that we needed some sort of regulation of that. And also, Director Robinson also had pointed out, that really the way our ordinance is written right now, there's not all that much they could do except catch somebody and warn them. So we modified this to make it easier to actually sanction someone for violating this. And of course, as he also pointed out, most of the violators are actually juveniles, and we don't really have the ability to cite them the same way that we would cite an adult. We might have to end up taking them down to juvenile in Fulton County, which is something that we certainly don't want to do. So it provided a mechanism pursuant to which if a parent, and this is the same provision that we have in the curfew ordinance, if a parent is just being unattentive and not controlling, and we do that by if they continue to have this problem, we give them a warning, and if it continues to happen, then we'll fine them or cite them, the adult. And that has been upheld in curfew ordinances and similar ordinances to this. Now, I will say, again, I started this off for discussion, and so the way that it is set up right now, it basically would prohibit the skateboarding and similar activity in all public areas of the city. You can certainly restrict that to certain areas. We just, again, it was a starting point. And I think Mr. Mitchell and Karen Richard have also, they've looked at that and suggested some alternatives for that, which would limit in two ways. One, but I'm going to let Don cover this. One, I think we want to take some of the prohibited activity out of the prohibition. And then two, we want to limit it to a core area, which, again, I think is primarily densely populated areas, and they can certainly define their feeling on that as well. And also the penalty provisions. We, as a lot of ordinances, we really don't know what the penalty or the fine should be to start with until we get more input from council. We just say we'll use the general penalty in the code, which by default is set by a judge, and it's up to $1,000. It does not to exceed $1,000, but it's usually typically a good bit less. I'm sorry. But you can also, within the ordinance itself, you can just specify, you get a warning, and then if you fail, then the second one you get a fine of $100. The third one, maybe you get $500. But again, those are just options that you have. So I'm happy to answer any questions. Again, I just wanted to get the discussion started, because we did have a lot of concerns and complaints about noise and danger and public safety. But by the same token, we don't want to label any group of people that enjoy something, and this allows you to, you can restrict the area, and I put in here also, doesn't mean you can't. At some point, if you want to designate an area in a park for skateboarding or something like that, you still have the opportunity to do that. So if you have any questions, I'll be glad to ask. Otherwise, I'll let Mr. Mitchell comment.
Mayor Pro Tem Mitchell.
Thank you, Mr. Sam. This is in no way to, as you've so eloquently stated, it's in no way to say that there are bad kids. We've got great kids in Alpharetta. We've got great young adults, and we want to have the least restrictive. I've talked with everyone on council, the least restrictive way of addressing the concerns that so many of our citizens have voiced. There's noise concerns, there's safety concerns, there's destruction of property concerns, and as Karen and I have been researching it, and I know Jason has done some on it. No. Some research on it. This is not an issue that other cities does not face. They all face this issue and have dealt with it at varying degrees. We felt like a citywide ordinance was the wrong route to go, because the issue is addressed mainly in our city center area, in the core business district area, and in our mixed-use developments where we have a lot of pedestrian traffic, and we're encouraging more pedestrian traffic. There have been instances not only on Old Roswell Street, Canton Street, and here in City Center, and so it's already prohibited at Avalon, is my understanding, because that's a private property. But we've proposed another ordinance that would limit it to, do you have the map, Kathy, of the Central Business District? If we can pull that up.
Cut this on for the.
It's on.
Bottom line is, we continue to hear about noise pollution, and over the pavers, over the side, you cannot walk in any sidewalk in City Center or the park behind us without railing being scratched and concrete and pavers being damaged and things like that. And it's coming from good kids who just want to have fun. So there's got to be a balance in how we approach this. It's the map. That's the Central Business District, which runs from Mayfield down to, Kathy, maybe to Wills Road on
Yeah, it's similar to the alcohol district. It's not as big as the downtown core. The downtown core.
I'm sorry, it's the pink inner core of the city.
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem, this may be a blow-up.
So from Church Street to Canton, Teasley Street to Old Milton Parkway and Tiffany Square Drive. It's a central business district, a very small area, but it encompasses the most density and the most amount of pedestrian traffic within our city. And the proposed ordinance that Karen and I had worked on would also, if there's in the future additional issues, it could be just going by where there are posted signs that prohibit skateboards or longboards or things like, and it's only, we tried to narrow it down to just sidewalks, the steps, the parking garages, parking lots, and anywhere there's ramping or just on sidewalks where there's pavers and it makes a lot of noise.
The way it was originally written, I think it included streets, but some people include streets in the ordinance, some people don't. You still have an issue sometimes with where they're not supposed to be in the street anyway.
We were trying to avoid the streets because the noise factor is not as much there as it is on pavers and sidewalks and steps that are being jumped and all.
Is that all you had?
Yes, thank you.
I believe Councilman Burnett had his finger up first, and then I'll go to Councilman Binder and Councilman Richard, if that's all right.
I heard damage to roads. So are skateboards the only vehicle, or sidewalks, we can choose either, we can pick it apart if you want to. Are skateboards the only thing that damages the value of a sidewalk or a road? Do strollers, do people that run, do people that...
I would say no to the latter two. I haven't seen any stroller damage, but part of skateboarding, if you're just skating down the street, the kids want to have fun. They're going to pop those things, and they're going to jump, and they're going to ramp. And we have had problems going way back. They used to do it on the fountains, and they chipped off the corners of the fountains. So that's where we've seen a lot of property damage come from, not with people jogging or...
Does, this might be a dumb question and Tom may have to answer it, but who pays for the repair of sidewalks? Is that residents?
Public sidewalk, the city pays for the repair of sidewalks.
The taxpayer?
The taxpayer.
Pays for the repair of the sidewalks? Okay. What makes any of the roads, and you can jump in if you want to, what, besides the fact that these are central to downtown, does anything else make a public street different than the one that gets paved in my neighborhood?
Well, unless your neighborhood is a gated community, that's a public street as well. So, if you, again, I'm just saying what we originally included, I think the suggestion was that we would...
The revision currently does not include streets. So the version that was at your position when we sat down tonight is a scaled-back version that doesn't include all public streets within the entire city. It doesn't our version that we're discussing tonight does not include streets. It includes sidewalks, alleys, parking decks, parking garages in the central business district. Plus, there are council members who asked to include mixed-use developments.
So I'll take the question there. Is it going to be the position of the city to tell CBRE or North American Properties or Prudential or insert commercial mixed-use developer here that they can develop something and that what is not permissible on their privately maintained sidewalks? Much as a restaurant, if they wanted to allow people to smoke in it?
We don't have any privately, we maintain the sidewalks. If they have, and we have jurisdiction on the sidewalks if they're publicly owned. if it's owned by a private entity.
Are the sidewalks at Avalon owned by the city of Alpharetta?
It's a hybrid of situation. There's some in there that are, and there's some in there that we maintain.
My other question is, it's referenced several times in, I believe both, that it's section 3040, does that sound right? Can you cite that provision for the public so that they have the ability, just detail what it says, what its contentions are, and then I'll ask you about the punitive nature of what we're going to do.
Okay, well, the original version that was in your packet said, no person shall propel skateboards, roller skates, or other similar devices upon a public street, highway, sidewalk, public parking lot, or parking space in the city.
So punitively, if my son or daughter is riding a skateboard and they are within this area on the screen that is highlighted in pink or red, what I can't, you don't can tell. Pink. And they commit an offense riding on a city sidewalk, what are the damages for the first offense in each offense accordingly?
That's really why we're here and why we're having a workshop. We're trying to work through that. I think, again, the general penalty could have, it would be just set by a judge who would have the authority to impose a fine of up to $1,000. But that's only where we don't specify a fine. If you wanted to specify a fine, you could say that the first instance is a warning, the second instance is $100, and the third instance might be $200. You can set it and have the ability to do that as you choose.
When my son Charlie, who just had his 7th birthday, can no longer afford to pay the penalty for skateboarding on a sidewalk, is this going to be considered misdemeanor status?
No, it's not, and Charlie wouldn't have to pay. You would have to pay if you continuously allowed your...
So we're going to lock me in a cage when I can't pay?
Well, we're not going to lock you up, but if...
Is that an option?
That's not the intent behind the ordinance. No, but it is, again, juveniles, we can't really cite. We're going to know, if we know their parent is, well, we're going to warn the parent. Typically, they'll live in the same area. Tell them, and I'm pretty certain that the police officer's not going to run up to your 7-year-old son unless he's in danger or something. But we do have kids that congregate sometimes in the city center areas and parking lots. And they may be deterred by a police officer there who's there for one day for 30 minutes, but they're not deterred beyond that. So the only thing we can really do is cite the parents, and that's where the deterrence comes in. And again, the only thing that I understand anybody's looking for is just deterrence from the standpoint of danger, safety, property destruction. It's there. It's probably the least of our concerns. Our concerns is somebody may be hurt, and that somebody is being disturbed. Everybody can do what they want to do within moderation, but if you're making someone else's life miserable, then we have to take that in consideration.
I would like to tell you, too, as the sponsor and co-sponsor, I am in favor of keeping people safe at parking decks. And besides that, I don't want to tell CBRE what business they can and can't be in, or North American Properties, or they can make that decision on their own.
So you're referencing the mixed-use component of the ordinance?
I don't want to tell a mixed-use developer that they can't allow skateboarders. There may be a great mixed-use developer out here that wants to come to Alpharetta that wants to cater only to skateboarding. Precluding that is not the business I want to be in. I don't necessarily think that opinion is based in reality, but it's within the realm of possibility, albeit remote. Sure. But I am in favor of keeping the kids and adults who choose to ride. I'll be 100% honest with you guys. My son and I, we love to go to the west side and get on the top of the parking deck on the west side of Alpharetta and ride skateboards. But there are less people over there. I'd never do it in City Center, but some people do. And it's not safe because when there's 400 cars in there, they come and go, and you have me with that argument. You lose me when you try to tell a commercial property owner what they can and cannot do. And that may just be the libertarian streak in me, but I am in favor of some idea here, but I am not in favor of what was published. I was embarrassed by. And I'm not going to necessarily say that that was 100% on you guys, but when you tell my 3-year-old and my 5-year-old that they can't ride a skateboard down my driveway and they break the law when they enter the city street, I'm not fine with that.
No, I would say that the reason that Mayor Pro Tem and I offered to get involved in rewriting it was because we didn't support it either. The way that it was initially written, it was overreaching with all city streets and all city sidewalks. So I was not involved in drafting the initial first reading ordinance, but I feel strongly about the fact that we as a city need something. I have experienced it personally, the issues that we have in the downtown city center, on sidewalks, in the parking deck. You want to believe people have used their common sense and that they see this as a crowded sidewalk and they don't try to endanger other people. But it's clear that that's not being done today. So we have to put some teeth behind the signs that we have out there, and we need to have an ordinance to address it. But it's only addressing sidewalks, and from my perspective, the priority is the safety component. I do see the property destruction, but it's the safety component. This is not the type of environment that can support your son Charlie or whomever on sidewalks in city center or down Canton Street. It's just, we've created a very walkable, pedestrian-friendly environment, and we don't have the ability to manage that type of activity in a safe environment. And the parking decks is, from a mixed-use perspective, I hear what you're saying, and I'd be interested to hear comments from the other council members that were interested in adding that mixed-use component. I personally don't feel that that is critical to this. In my view, it is the core business district. The sidewalks are the concern for me, and the alleys. That's what I think we need to address from a public safety perspective. Thank you.
Councilman Binder, you have the floor.
I think we got the blessing and the curse of City Center. So a lot of great things have come up, but what's tiring is we're acting as property managers, we're like in the property manager fee above and beyond what we're getting there. So I understand. I think, frankly, both sides have behaved poorly on this. I would like to see it a little bit better, but I'm glad we're addressing this now so we can alleviate the conflicts that are happening. My big question for you, Sam, is there a way that we can just say skateboards, now that we said you're off the sidewalks and everything, we're treating you as a vehicle. So you can't, just like you can't do figure eights or spin out your car, you can't do it with the skateboard. So we just kind of put the laws more on the action of what's happening as opposed to the vehicle type. So, because we're talking about skateboarding today, but you know what? Kids might be coming out because we don't have any rules on bikes.
and there are other, when you come with legislation, you try to deal with a specific problem. If you try to anticipate everything that happen in the future, you'll never have an ordinance. Here, and as far as your question goes, your concern is?
I can't see you through the mask if you're asking me a question, but my concern, to that point, I want to address the issue, not the vehicle choice.
So that was it. Motor vehicle is defined by law. No, so we can't put that in the category of being a motor vehicle. So we'll have to approach it someplace else.
And so, like a bicycle, don't we say you treat that as a car?
Some ordinances, not all, some have a prohibition. Some have a caveat that it only applies if you're operating in a dangerous manner. The problem with that comes, and we've had, there are discussion rooms on these things, and when we look and we're doing something like this, and enforcement, so that becomes an enforcement nightmare. Everybody who can afford a defense lawyer beats that by saying, well, how can you prove they were doing that, or and your sign wasn't close enough, or your sign was down here. At some point, you say you can't do it here if you want to have good enforcement.
And then, speaking of enforcement nightmares, so my concern on the mixed use. So, for instance, North Point, it's mixed use at JCPenney's and the old Sears, but the rest of it's not mixed use. Or if we want to say this is how we treat skateboards in the North Point area, understand there. So, I know you're not, and since we have until next week to look at, or when they bring an ordinance, I really would like to hear from public safety and really people take incident on, should we add mixed use because of just the conflict of how messy that is.
Certainly, we're open to the will of the council on that.
I wouldn't want to do that.
And I do and I will say that the original issue arose in City Center, where we've all experienced some problems or witnessed it.
And then I want to say to Councilmember Mitchell and Councilmember Richard, thank you for adopting this orphan ordinance. I thought it was a piece of garbage as well, the first one, but the new starting point, it was good I understand what happened, and that's just, we're playing outside of our home field, so I think that's just kind of what happened, so I'm glad we're addressing it. You guys put something straightforward. I think I sent on the Grand Rapids, Michigan, what they were doing, and they banned everything entirely, and then they said, okay, let's offer it to streets because of the transportation used for inline skates and bikes. One thing they did add it, and I would, as a father as well, I would like to see what Grand Rapids had was, I think, 14 and younger could use, 15 or younger, but middle school age, they could use the sidewalks for transportation. I understand that a police officer is not going to ticket a kid. I'd just rather have the law apply with what we're doing. So I would personally like to see it. It's not a hill I'm willing to climb on it, but I think that would be something I'd like to see.
So when you say the age component, you want the age component in there so that if they're under 15, they can use a skateboard on a sidewalk in the city center, in the downtown core that we're identifying?
I would think so. The kids are going around. We're making it a walkable community. We're making it a pedestrian friendly, and people with bikes. I wouldn't have a problem with a kid on a bike on a sidewalk. So yes, I would, but I'm interested in hearing what the rest of the group thinks. Okay. I think it's a good idea as a father. I don't really want, even when I'm just rather than being on the sidewalk. So.
And yep. Regardless of whether they're doing trickery or skateboarding. I'm just asking. I'm just trying to get clarity.
I would rather prefer us put it to the behavior of what we're trying to stop as opposed to the type. But if you guys are going to do it this route, then yes, I would like it by age, allowing it for sidewalks. Again, I'm not going to push it. This is not my battle for it, but that's my personal preference.
All right, thank you.
Mayor Pro Tem Mitchell, I think you had asked to follow up on something.
Thank you. I wanted to go back and follow up. Ben had asked, what's the difference between a city street in someone's neighborhood versus the downtown? And I think we're avoiding a large part of the complaints that we've gotten from citizens is that we encourage pavered sidewalks in our downtown core. That makes a huge racket, especially when it's right across the street. I've heard complaints from folks. They love the kids. They go down and talk to the kids. Please don't come by here skating by and doing tricks and knocking over the planters in front of Teasley Place. It's not just City Center. It's the noise violation. And people, even though they move to City Center, and I get it, you accept some of the noise when you move to a busy, bustling downtown. I totally get that. You accept concerts at night. You accept things like that. You accept louder groups that are talking and having fun and playing. And that's part of the reason people move downtown. But it doesn't mean you have to be awakened at 6 a.m. with skateboarders and 7 a.m. and your peace disturbed constantly from the skateboarding over pavers and over sidewalks and steps. We're missing the point of where citizens have complained repeatedly about this, and this is not an easy thing to bring up, because I think we all want kids to have fun. We all want that, but there's got to be a balance between this. Thank you.
Councilman Hives, did you have a comment or a question?
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. With regard to what's been proposed, I want to voice my support for the parking decks and the parking lots. Using, especially the parking decks going downhill, cars going uphill, that's a recipe for disaster, and I believe there's been some consensus about, even in the absence of data, that that's a danger that we would be addressing. When it comes to the other arguments that have been made, I'm troubled by the ordinance. I've been on this council for 2 years, and I observed the prior council for 4 years prior to that. And we have certainly made the case that we are the nanny state council. We have told young people they shall not vape in this city. I supported that. It had its own unique reasons. But we said we limited the vaping. I didn't say we outlawed it. We limited the vaping. Thank you for your bringing it. We outlawed the e-scooters. You know, a bunch of people our age, we don't use e-scooters. We don't like them laying around. I don't like them laying around. I fully supported that. More nanny state by the city of Alpharetta. And now a bunch of us older folks up here, we don't like skateboarding. You know, kids skateboard. We don't skateboard except for Ben. He's a young guy. There's a part of me that really resists being a nanny state city council. For every right that we seek to grant to somebody, we are in the process of depriving somebody of a right that they currently have. So tax-paying citizens right now who like to ride skateboards, or who have kids who like to ride skateboards, they pay property taxes. They paid for the very paved sidewalks that they're riding on. We're going to take that right away from them. But the question then becomes, why are we going to take it away from them? Why are we going to deprive somebody an existing right and be the nanny state? And from what I've heard destruction of property, which then people muffle under their breath, but that's not our main concern. I've heard it's a danger to others, and I've heard anecdotal stories. But what I've really heard is it's noisy. It's just too noisy. I don't like that particular noise. Or I moved someplace where that particular noise pre-existed, and since I've moved there, I don't want that noise to be there after I've already moved here. And another thing that we've been, in addition to a nanny state council, is we've been a data-driven council. And I go through downtown all the time. And I see the skateboarders. I hear the skateboarders. I see bicycles on sidewalks. I see hoverboards on sidewalks. I see segways on sidewalks. I see bicycles on sidewalks. I see all kinds of things on sidewalks. I see people having to dodge lots of things. But we don't like young kids on skateboards. The noise argument is lost on me. When you move to city center, you move to the center of a city. When you move opposite venues that play music up till 1 o'clock at night, authorized by the city, you get music till 1 o'clock at night. If people come into this council chamber and say, I moved to downtown, I opened my windows last night when I just moved in, and I heard music, I want this council to stop the music from downtown. Guess what? The music was there first, and the skateboarders were there first. So the noise argument is truly lost on me. Living off of Academy Street, there's sirens. In the morning, there's the backup of the delivery vehicles. There are loud voices at 10:30 at night outside Central City Tavern. That's living in the center of a city called City Center. So while I can fully support the parking deck and the parking lot aspects because of the interaction with vehicles, I'm having trouble taking away existing rights for skateboarders, people who own skateboarders, people who pay property tax to ride on their sidewalks, because other people think that's too noisy for me. That particular noise is too noisy. And I know there's a healthy debate about this. I know that there are conflicting points of view about this. And I wanted to say on the record, I fully respect those competing points of view. But I want this point of view to be heard as well by council, to be taken into account as we craft this piece of this ordinance. That's what I wanted to say.
Thanks, sir. Any other comments? Councilwoman Richard.
I'd just like to articulate, I guess, my position. My position is not about the noise. My position is about the public safety. And I have raised two boys who were skateboard guys back in their teenage years and adolescent years, and, you know, had great fun in the roads and in the sidewalks in our neighborhood using their skateboards. If I had been living in this environment, I would not have allowed them to use the skateboards on the sidewalks in our core area. I think I have firsthand experience with it being a safety issue. I'm not referencing anecdotal experience. I have literally had to jump out of the way of these guys coming down city center sidewalks. I've had to dodge them in the parking garages, and I know Councilmember Hyde supports the parking garage, but my position is not because I am looking for opportunities to enforce a nanny-state environment. I think it's a public safety issue. I think it's been in existence for quite some time, and I am supportive of moving forward and getting an ordinance on the books. Thank you.
Anyone else from council have any comments? Well, I'll just mention a couple of things. Since it's a workshop, we're not voting tonight, in case anybody isn't familiar with how we work. On a workshop, it's for discussion to decide whether we should move forward with an item or something like that. And this is a topic that has been raised several times. A couple quick things. I think the MU may have inadvertently come from a discussion that I had at one point, because we were addressing ways to limit the geographic areas that an ordinance like this would apply. And I thought, well, maybe within mixed use would make sense, because when I think about the safety of the concern to me is, and I saw it this weekend, you know, I was out with my son, city center, and there were quite a few skateboarders. I don't know whether it's because it's been in the papers and social media lately, but there must have been 15 or 20, and not many of them were under 15. They weren't my age by any stretch of the imagination, but these were adults as far as the ordinance contemplates. They had beards, and you know. What I find it so challenging is that when people respect each other, going back to your comments about the nanny state, when human beings respect each other, government doesn't have to make these types of decisions. But right now we've got a situation where just normal common courtesy doesn't always, relying on common courtesy doesn't always solve the issue. Because I did see danger. I mean, I saw people doing tricks on the town square, on the sidewalks, and on those brick walls, while the streets and the sidewalks were busy. And so I thought, you know, they may have a right to do it, but come on, guys, can't you find one over somewhere else that you're not going to be really scaring people or endangering lives or conflicts with cars? So I do think there's an interest in that, and I thought that those conflicts between a lot of pedestrian traffic and normal traffic on the roads and things like that, I think the greatest conflicts are from MU. But the point is taken. You know, most MU in the city is privately owned and will continue to be, and I had no intention of trying to impose any restrictions on Avalon or North Point as it becomes mixed use or any of the other developers. That was just a suggestion because I had not come up with an idea about the central business district. So I'm not tied to that by any stretch of the imagination. However, I'm sympathetic to the call of restricting it unnecessarily, but I do think that what I see happening in downtown city center, unfortunately, we can't rely on people to show each other the common courtesy that we would expect on sidewalk. If I saw people on bikes doing what I saw people doing on skateboards over the weekend, a block and a half from here, I would be talking about how we stop them from doing trick bikes there too. And so I'm sympathetic to your comment about the vehicle itself, but I don't know how we resolve that. I'm concerned about the age thing because how does an officer enforce whether somebody's 13 or not? You know, because you don't have driver's licenses at that age. You know, I think it's tricky there. I understand maybe somebody younger because, quite frankly, our officers aren't going to write somebody a ticket because their 6-year-old is pedaling with training wheels on the sidewalk. So I'm not how we resolve, I know, I'm just saying, I'm not sure how we resolve it. I don't want to put our officers in the position of trying to disagree with a young person who says they're 14 and they don't have a driver's license. You know, if maybe with parental supervision or something along those lines I could live with. But that's just kind of based on the comments I've heard and the concerns I've heard from the public. That's kind of where I am. I think there's value in trying to figure this out. I don't know what the right answer is, and there's no way we're going to do anything that's going to satisfy everybody either way. But I do think this is a worthy exercise, and I appreciate those of you that have participated. Councilman Merkel.
Yeah, I've been kicking this back and forth. I've had discussions with several people up here in regards to this. The original discussions that I was involved in was talked about parking decks and mixed use because of the density. This map is strictly to appease some people in one other part of the city of this map area. I know people with offices on Old Canton Street, they have no complaints about skateboarders. I think you're throwing too big of a net just to bring in one complex on the edge of this mark. And it was told to me by a council member that it was drawn this way to pick up a property clear on the other side. So right there, I don't hold much for this map right here. If we were going to discuss, again, parking decks and parking lots, I can see the merit there. I would think that if you look at Avalon, my wife and I walk all over the city. We'll walk from the Avalon Hotel to Wells Park and back. I don't see the skateboarders down there. Now, they have some enforcement because some of that is private, so they handle it. So I'd consider something like this if it was reduced to the mixed use with the mixed use management being on board, because I haven't heard anything from the management company over here. You know, maybe they're not looking for me and I need to go find them.
No, they've actually they've spoken in public comment during our...
Why don't they invoke the outlaw skateboards on their property?
I think that's a fair point, and I think one of the things about City Center that makes this unique is that there are city sidewalks right next to the private sidewalks, the way that, actually, I'm going to defer to either James or Kathy, they're both nodding at me, but the way City Center is designed, our sidewalks are side by side. Sometimes there's a knee wall separating them. You want to clarify for me?
Yes, ma'am. Actually, doesn't really need clarifying. You summed it up quite well.
Okay.
Basically, within City Center, all of the sidewalks are public, with very few exceptions. The parking deck, we have one, they have two, one of which adjoins ours. For the public areas, in private areas like Avalon, for instance, it's private property. The sidewalks there are private, and so they can actually trespass folks off of those sidewalks, out of the parking decks, et cetera. Not to put words in our public safety director's mouth, but we've had a lot of discussions about this, so I feel pretty comfortable at least put them in mind at this point. So the challenge for our officers with our parking deck and with public sidewalks is they're public. You can't trespass somebody off of a public sidewalk or out of a public parking deck unless we put hours of operation on those. So that's where the challenge is that you're speaking to. And, I have had conversation with the management of not just of the Amaranth Apartments, although we have heard from her, but also the commercial. And they have expressed some concern in some of the things that they are seeing especially on the sidewalks and in the parking deck. And they've expressed concerns about potential collisions and potential injuries.
Can I sell them?
Thank you, James.
For $1.
Any other comments or questions from council?
Can I ask one?
Please do. You're the only one up here that has it.
Where do we go from here? I think I'm hearing that, I think there are areas where there is consensus, and there are other areas that are still up for debate. So if we want to move it forward, I would suggest incorporating where there is consensus and what's been put forth by the sponsor and the co-sponsor, together with what we've heard today, and I'll circulate another version tomorrow, and people can take a look, and you can decide if you want to continue to just work that, or if you want to bring it back for a vote.
Right, and I appreciate you asking, because that's one thing during a workshop, I always try to give staff enough clarity so you know how to proceed. My recommendation, based on what we're hearing tonight, is that it's worthwhile trying to get it right. And while we can't meet as a quorum and make decisions, I would encourage the two sponsors to take into consideration what you've heard from the rest of us this evening and put some thought around it. Don't leave it on Sam's plate to try to figure out, because it's been a bit of a mess coming from a lot of different directions as far as the input. But if y'all can have conversations and make a good faith effort, and we'll just keep kicking it around. At some point, if we need to, we can bring it back for another workshop as well. Councilmember Burnett?
This is for Sam or James or Kathy. At City Center, can you guys determine which sidewalks belong to whom? That would be helpful for me, and I think that the rest of us would appreciate knowing that as well. And it doesn't have to be right now. I just know that nobody owns all of it, and everybody owns some. Thank you.
We definitely can. It's actually laid out within the contract.
It shows it completely. Yep. We can do it.
Sam, you think you got enough to run with?
Yeah, absolutely.
Thanks, sir.
It's as clear as my glasses, right?
I know. Like I said, I wasn't going to leave you hanging. I was going to try to get some clarity there for you, but I appreciate you asking.
Mayor Gilvin, we do have a public comment card.
Okay. We don't typically allow it, but if anybody made it through the monsoon to come here through the coronavirus crisis, by golly, you have an opportunity to come give you 3 minutes of comments.
Stephen Witt, and I believe it's him with members of his family, if you don't mind if they would come together to the podium.
However they prefer.
Okay, thank you. 3315 Commerce Street.
Good evening, Council, Mr. Mayor, and Mr. Mayor Pro Tem. I worked all day on this, and I'm not going to read it. I will start out by saying that your enforcement nightmare is not your nightmare. Your nightmare, and pardon me for the language, is someone getting whacked on the sidewalks of City Center because you've got skateboarders using that area up there and unsuspecting parents, kids walking through the tunnel between Vitality Bowl and Crave Pie while they're jumping off the steps, having a head-on collision there. Your biggest problem is not enforcement. Your biggest problem is yet to come, and your problem is coming. The issue that you have here is that when you designed downtown Alpharetta and you designed City Center, you designed the perfect skate park. You've got ramps, you've got rails, you've got grind rails, you've got jumps, you've got everything that they're looking for. And if I were a teenager, I would be trying to do the same thing. The reason they come to downtown Alpharetta is because it's safe. Basketball players go to basketball courts. Softball and baseball players go to ball fields. Football players go to their respective fields. Tennis players go to the tennis courts. Skateboarders have no place to go. So they have to use downtown Alpharetta as their de facto skate park, and that's what they do. Yes, the noise is an issue. It is relentless. When you live down here, you accept certain things, like ambulance noise, like beepers on trucks backing up. You accept the noise of the nightlife, but it comes and it goes. The noise of the clashing and the banging and the rapping and the clackety-clack of the skateboards is relentless, and it goes on all day. Even in what I would consider, and I think all of you would agree, is our sacred time between 10 and 12 o'clock on Sunday mornings, when you're trying to relax because you can't go to church, yet you've got to listen to this skateboard activity on the sidewalks. Regardless if it's public sidewalk or someone owns a sidewalk, they're all the same. They're out there clackety-clack, coming down in front of Crave Pie and jumping that high level of steps right down into the alleyway when you've got unsuspecting, innocent pedestrians walking through the alleyway to come and shop and come and spend their money, who are risking their safety because they don't know that someone's coming down that area. I actually witnessed a skateboarder skate through one end of Kilwins and out the door of the other end of Kilwins the other day. I have personally had 2 near misses in the parking deck since we've lived here, skateboarders skating down the ramps at speeds much faster than posted speeds of automobiles would ever go, yet they look at me like I'm the person in the wrong. And I ask the question, if something were to happen, who's responsible for that? Is it me driving up? Is it them coming down? I think the responsibility is ultimately going to lie with whoever doesn't have enough money and hires the lesser attorney when this goes to court. But again, your biggest issue is the safety of the public on the sidewalks. And as a secondary issue, the noise is relentless. But the only loser in this is going to be the city of Alpharetta in the long run when the wrong person gets hit and the wrong person gets injured by a skateboarder. When you overextend the rights to skateboarders, you are diminishing the rights of innocent citizens to access the public sidewalks and the public streets. The streets in downtown Alpharetta are very, very crowded with automobiles. And they skateboard in between the cars all the time to jump the curbs. You never know when someone's going to be backing their car up or moving their car forward to get out of a parallel parking zone right about the time a skateboarder is passing between it. So yes, it's not just me and it's not just your constituents, it's the skateboarders as well. And I'm advocating for the skateboarders. They need a place to go and they need a place to skate. And they need an outlet like every other person who is recreating has a way to satisfy their outlets for recreation. They need a place to go. And I would implore the council to stay with this issue thoroughly, continually, until you find resolution that not only satisfies the skateboarders, because they don't want the trouble either. They want a place to go where they can exercise their outlets. But as a resident here, and I can assure you...
Mr. Wood, I'm going to have to ask you...
30 seconds. I can assure you as a resident of downtown Alpharetta, I choose to pay rent. And I would bet the house that a big portion of the rent that I pay goes towards somebody's property taxes down here. And I was a home-owning resident of Alpharetta for a long time, and I paid my share of property taxes. And to favor one group over another, we're all paying property taxes to be here in some form or another, is unfair. And I resent the allegation that homeowners and property owners have a greater advantage than renters do. You wanted us to come down here, and we came down here. But I would implore you to stay with this issue until it gets resolved, because at the end of the day, the only loser is going to be the city of Alpharetta when this comes to a head and the wrong person is injured or the wrong piece of property gets damaged. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. He's already used up your time.
No, he hasn't.
Never use your time.
Please try to keep it to 3 minutes, though, seriously.
My name's Ashley Witt. You are all familiar with me. I am not against the skateboarders. With all due respect, this has nothing to do with you and your 6 or 7-year-old. Do you sit on your balcony in peace and quiet? No, there are cars and there are sirens, there are horns, there's lots of noise. But do you pay $4,000 to live in city center and then listen to banging and crashing at 9 o'clock at night, at 10 o'clock at night, at 10 o'clock in the morning? And then does someone treat you like you're other because you rent? You're referred to us as other people. And I have sent you all several emails, and I have referenced the skateboarders we have spoken to and where they live, and that we've noticed them sitting on their balcony in peace and quiet while their child is over here skateboarding. I am not opposed to skateboarding or skateboarders. I am a proponent, as my husband is, of a skate park for them, and I have asked repeatedly, why did you not build them a skate park? And someone said, I don't want to name any names, Councilman Merkel said that there was no call for it. But the skateboarders, there are 199 names on a petition. 199 names of skateboarders who signed a petition for a skate park in Alpharetta because they don't want to have to drive to Cumming. When our children were growing up, they didn't skateboard. But they did play sports, and we did drive them to those sports. And we have paid taxes for a long time. And we would love for the skateboarders to have a skate park. But I don't believe City Center is the skate park. And I don't believe it was intended as such. And CBRE won't have anyone renting $4,000 apartments if they're going to have to listen to the noise of skate parks, skateboarders. Yes, we moved here expecting sirens and other noises.
Ms. Witt, I appreciate
But
your comments.
we are other because we rent.
Your 3 minutes are up.
Businesses here.
Thank you. Were there any other public comment cards?
We did receive one comment online from the manager of Amarant's.
Okay. If you don't mind, would you share that with us?
Her name is Melanie Levy. The address over there is 2001 Commerce Street. She just says, I'm unable to speak in person, but I want to let you know it's the safety of the skateboards we're most concerned about. They jump out in front of cars, people backing up in parking deck have almost hit them, and someone will get hurt. It's a matter of time.
Thank you, sir. That all the comments we had from online?
Yes, sir.
But if there's anyone else here who would like to come and speak on this item at this time, now's your opportunity to do so. Seeing none, we'll close public comment. As I mentioned before, we will not be voting on this item. We'll continue to work on it. And at some point in time, we may actually get it whittled down to something that seems to be reasonable for everyone on council, or at least a majority of so. Second item up under our workshops this evening is the Unified Development Code text amendments about chickens. Director Cook, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. The next item is also a workshop item, so looking for guidance and discussion, and this is regarding changing the Unified Development Code to allow backyard chickens. And this is a request. We've actually had several requests over the years from residents that are requesting for us to change the Unified Development Code to allow chickens on properties other than the AG zoned properties. And Alpharetta, right now, it's just subject to the Fulton County Animal Control. And even if we change our code, we're still subject to Fulton County animal regulations. And what we did is we did some research so we can make a recommendation to you if you were open to changing the current code. So City of Roswell, they actually allow a maximum of 6 chickens on 0.33 acres, a little over 14,000 square foot lots. City of Milton is 1 acre lots. They allow actually 12 per acre, maximum 35. And then Johns Creek, they don't have a minimum size lot, but they do have the 100-foot setbacks for structures. And then we looked at City of Marietta, which allows chickens on a minimum of 15,000 square feet. And so just taking that data and looking at different properties that we have in the City of Alpharetta, our recommendation is to bring an ordinance forward that would change the Unified Development Code and allow a maximum of 6 chickens on a 1 acre minimum lot in Alpharetta. And you'll see with the UDC changes that we're recommending, the changes. It actually goes through several different residential properties. So we have the AG zoning, which can be, some of the AG properties are actually less than an acre. The RE, the R, and even the R22 and the R15. Because when we went through and we did a research on 1 acre lots, there's several that are zoned R15, because basically along Mid-Broadwell and other areas that have lots that are back up to floodplain, they may actually have more than 15,000 square feet. So the proposal is to change the code to add 1 acre to allow chickens, maximum of 6, no roosters, and then to follow the Fulton County animal control for setbacks. And I'd like to hear any comments or suggestions or questions that you may have.
Councilman Binder.
Can I have 3 chickens if I have a half acre?
No. Not as currently written. And now if you want to, offer some different changes.
Councilman Burnett.
I do not know how I feel about this, but I will tell you I grew up next to a rooster, and it was awful at 5:30 every morning for years. And so I don't know how I feel about the rest of it, but I'm very supportive of no roosters.
Okay.
Mayor Pro Tem Mitchell.
I'm personally fine with the chickens as long as they don't have skates on.
Anyone else? It's interesting. I'll be brief. So when I first got elected in 2011, I don't even recall if I had been sworn in. I don't think I hadn't been sworn in January. I got a call from a gentleman in the city of Roswell. And for those of you who've lived in this area for some time, you may remember this story. I had a blog at the time. And so he heard, he had apparently read my blog. He heard that I'd won the election. He reached out to me and asked me if I could help him because he lived in the city of Roswell. And there had been an ongoing battle with the city because he had chickens that he had had for a long time. And the city was trying to tell him he couldn't have chickens. And it went on. He was incarcerated numerous times, and I don't know the details. I'm sure that there was just cause, but it was just an ongoing situation. They call him the Chicken Man. He was in the paper so much. I believe Jerry Wood, who was the mayor at the time, represented the Chicken Man in his battles against the city at times. And he ended up dying. I told him, I said, there's nothing I can do. I'm just elected to city council, and we're in Alpharetta. I recommend some good attorneys for you or something like that. And he died because he ended up getting barricaded in his home when the city and the government had foreclosed condemned his property and things like that. And I share that with you because the comments earlier about the nanny state resonate with me. I can't even remember who it is. There's a quote I've read and I like a lot. It says, when you pass a law, you should decide whether it's worth shooting grandma over with, And so the challenge here is I have no objection to what you've written. I think it's reasonable. But why 6? Why not 7? Why 25 feet, not 40 feet? We don't deal a lot of times with black and white up here, whether it's skateboards or chicken and stuff like that. But one, I just wanted to share the story of the Chicken Man because it breaks my heart that I wasn't able to help him in any way. And to say that I support what you're doing here. There may be tweaks that would need to be one way or another, But once again, common courtesy. If people just wouldn't have roosters, it probably wouldn't have created so many ordinances against them to begin with. But.
And that's, you bring that up. So I remember that, and there was a lot of issues back then. So we actually called all the different cities, the code enforcement, to check and see if there was any complaints with their current ordinances, and we didn't have any from surrounding cities. So like 4 different cities we called code enforcement, and there hasn't been any issues. So.
Okay, good. Thank you for doing that. Councilman Burnett, I believe you wanted.
Kathy, I'm going to ask you an unfair question. How many 1 acre homes do you estimate there are in the city of Alpharetta?
There's 652.
No, but who's counting?
Yeah,
Okay, thank you.
yes.
Anything else from council on this item?
And of course, they could have covenants that prohibit, even if we put this in place, an individual's subdivision covenant could prohibit.
Yeah, I'm sure some of our subdivisions already have prohibitions.
Can you tell me at some point later this week how many are not protected by covenants?
I can probably find that
Or,
out.
or get close? Yes. Thank you.
Anything else from council? Kathy, you have what you need to move forward?
I do, thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. So that'll, unless there's someone here that wants to speak on the chicken ordinance, we will allow public comment since we did with Scape. Seeing no one, we'll close public comment. Third item up on the workshop agenda this evening is presentation and discussion of recommended fiscal year 2021 budget. Director Harris, you have the floor.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. This is the second workshop on the budget since it was put out on April 30th. At the last meeting, we went into a pretty formal, detailed presentation. I wasn't planning on doing that tonight. I did want to mention in your packet the excerpt of the budget. I think it goes through page 70 of the budget. We did add 2 projects to the unfunded capital list. The 92 Milton Avenue mid-block crossing, page 34, and Roswell at Old Roswell Street, pedestrian improvements. It does not, at this time, include the amendment that I discussed on an email Friday where the amendment to bring back into the general fund the $3 million transfer over to the capital project fund that was in the budget. I think it's a better place for it to remain in the general fund to cover revenue shortfalls if that potentially continues as we go through this COVID, the impact of COVID on our revenues. Anyways, when it was transferred over to the capital project fund, there was an unallocated balance of approximately $4 million after we make that transfer of $3 million. So we still could leave $1 million there, bring it back in the general fund. It's a better place for it to be to cover, again, the revenues. As far as the capital project fund, keep in mind that by your action, the mayor and council, a couple weeks before the budget was approved, I think you put the brakes on a lot of the capital projects that we had this year and unappropriated those balances, probably $3 or $4 million, and that gave us a lot of the funding source in the capital project fund itself to cover a lot of the recurring projects. So in the budget itself, we still are doing $8.7 million of recurring type projects, but we'll still have $1 million in unallocated capital in the capital project fund, and then we now have a reserve in the general fund of this $3 million that we're not transferring over, together with the $1 million we had in the original proposed budget. So you'll have $4 million in the general fund. Puts us much better in a position when you look at our revenues. Where some of you noted that they didn't look like that we maybe weren't conservative enough on the revenue side. It was the intent that eventually, that if we had a problem, we wouldn't need to make that transfer. It's better we just hold the transfer back in the general fund, and it provides that buffer in the general fund. So that was not in the document you had. I can do a small recap or just answer it up to questions and answers on the what's in the budget.
Any questions? Councilman Burnett?
Thank you.
Councilman Hype will be up next.
Director Harris, can you run through the developments that we have that are currently under tax abatement status and talk about what that looks like for incremental uplift for 2021?
I wasn't prepared in detail to do that, but I could give you the city center downtown, I believe, would be coming on primarily this next tax roll year.
So it's not on there today?
It is not. I
Thank you.
don't think most of it is on there. Very, very little of it is on there because of when it was considered complete for the county. So, and we have Jackson Healthcare and can't remember, Edison's coming, but I don't know what year that is. But I can get you a detail of those developments.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah.
Councilman Hypes?
Director Harris, if, after making the adjustments that you had alluded to and also in your email from Friday, there'll be non-allocated of approximately 4 or 4.1 million under the general fund?
Correct, like a contingency, correct, yes.
Yeah. And that would be, at least in my budget proposal booklet, page 58 down at the bottom. I would be interested in a couple of adjustments to the budget, one of which is the Quint apparatus. It's on page 19 of the budget packet. It's a $300,000 item for phase one. The second year would be another $300,000 after that. Can you speak to how that could be journal entered out of that $4 million or $4.1 million under the non-allocated under the general fund? For example, could we have a reserve fund of $300,000 so that doesn't get spent and the non-allocated is properly reflected as to how much remains after that?
Yes, we could, through the budget process, either an amendment by the mayor or when he brings forward the budget, have a line item specifically if the intent is to take another look at it. We'd leave it in a reserve for Quint, and in that case, it would still need action throughout the budget year to actually put that. You could create the line item in a reserve, but it would give the council another period of time before they actually pull the trigger on public safety hiring and bringing that into the budget. That's one way. The other way is adding it if we felt that it is something that you want to bring forward now and put it in the budget, then it would be added to the initiatives, operating initiatives page that has $200 and something thousand of operating initiatives that the mayor has. And that could be the other option, is that it goes there instead. It would reduce the reserve unallocated of 4.1, as you mentioned, down by that respective amount. It just depends whether or not you want it to be part of something that once the budget is approved, the department can move forward with that hiring or spending those funds, or do you want to take another shot at it, leave it in a reserve, but separating it enough from the general revenue potential loss reserve that is there now, but giving it some more delineation by calling it reserve for Quint. Does that make sense?
So the Quint apparatus will replace a 2012 pumper truck that's going out of service and a ladder truck because it's a combined apparatus. And having lost those two pieces of equipment, I believe Director Robinson has inform people that it is something essential to maintain levels of service. So from a budgeting point of view, do you have any input or preference as to setting $300,000 aside as a reserve in this year's budget down at the bottom of page 58, carving that out of the $4 million, or seeking to find the full 600 next year without knowing what the economic circumstances would be? Do you have a budgeting preference?
When we, at the retreat, I think, very early on, our intent was we knew that this was an initiative that in total cost about $800,000. And it's not because of the vehicle differential between the pumper truck that's under a lease and turning that in and replacing it with a Quint is about $100,000 in lease cost a year over the next 10 years. So the majority of the cost is operational of 6 personnel and their stuff. So it's going to cost you every year. And even prior to COVID, the concept was that we need to be aware that that's happening sometimes next fiscal year. And I think it's moved up some. I think originally we thought it was going to be later in that fiscal year, 2022.
and now it's going to be next summer, I believe, a year from now. So it was always to get ready for that. Sometimes it's easier to bring in half the budget or some portion of the budget in a year. So that was the intent. It obviously means it's easier if it's there. Now, we've all woke up to the COVID world that we took out $4 million, over $4 million in revenues from our pre-COVID budget to what is before you now. So, and we've made adjustments accordingly. So, but if it, obviously if it's a priority, and I believe if everyone believes it's a priority, then calling it out may be a better than just leaving it in with the general reserve. But that's your guys' call.
Okay. And Mr. Mayor, follow your lead on this. I wanted to bring or make the proposal about moving the $300,000 for the Quint into the budget as a reserve out of that unallocated reserve as discussed. And I had another proposal about moving the $20,000 for the flock safety LPR cameras. Do you want to take up proposed changes at this point while Mr. Harris is at the podium, or do you want me to wait on that?
No, I think a workshop is to give them clarity on the sense of council. So I don't mind going ahead and have that discussion. I'd like to hear from all of us. And I know Councilman Binder, I'm coming to you next, I promise.
Well, if that's just, I'm like so used to my Zoom of just having the hand up.
I know. I'll acknowledge.
If that's the
I
case,
acknowledge that you are next.
with respect to the flock cameras, if I may ask Director Robison to come up for just a moment on the flock cameras. And this is a budget item out of $145 million overall, all in. This is a $20,000 item. But can you speak to, with respect to the LPR cameras that we've had installed and approved already, any successes where it's actually made the force more efficient in terms of use of personnel and actually making our dollars go further? But for example, was there any recent successes with the LPR just in the last few days?
Absolutely. So right now we currently have LPRs in 4 strategic locations utilizing Georgia Power poles. And that's something you approved last year. And
I'm sorry to interrupt you. Could you explain what an LPR is for those who may not be aware and haven't been following?
I'm sorry, you're right, Mayor. I apologize. LPR stands for License Plate Reader. These are cameras that take photographs of license. And if there is an issue regarding the vehicle, registration, potentially a person associated with that vehicle that is, let's say, has a warrant for arrest, something like that, officers are alerted through that. So it's not a video camera, it's a still camera that takes pictures. So at a location, for instance, where one of these are set up, every car that goes through, those tags are photographed. Unless there is an issue related to us in law enforcement, we never see them again, never have anything to do with them again, only if it's, again, connected to some type of criminal activity or potential, violation with the vehicle. With that said, you approved last year, I believe, the LPRs for some strategic locations that we are utilizing Georgia Power poles, and those have been great. Just over the weekend, there was a homicide in Chamblee. The vehicle that was involved in that, as well as some suspects that were involved in that. The next night, we're here in Alpharetta. LPR alerted the officers. The officers were able to get the 3 people in custody, get the vehicle in custody that was involved in the homicide, and Chamblee came and got that, of course. I could give you numerous examples. I have provided a document to Mr. Hypes, and we'll be happy to send that to you just in the last year. And we've only had these up for a few months up and running. It's taken a while to get them going. But we, in the last month or 2, forgive my timeline, we had a series of entering autos one evening, which you all know is one of our issues we have in Alpharetta, with property crimes, and through the use of the LPR, we were able to identify one of the vehicles that was witnessed by a homeowner. Long story short, we were able to catch and apprehend the 2 people that were involved that night in about 26 entering autos. And that's just 2 of, I would say, dozens already that we've seen. The cool thing about LPRs, and with flock cameras is that all the other agencies in our metro area also have these same cameras, and we share that data with each other as well. And so if we have a car stolen from Alpharetta, let's say, if it's alerted in South Atlanta somewhere on one of their LPRs, we're going to know about that immediately, know that one of our missing vehicles that were stolen out of Alpharetta is now there. And so we basically are part of a larger network now of the metro Atlanta area, and sharing that data, of course, is a tremendous value.
So these success stories are on 4 cameras, and the ask is for 10 cameras at a total cost of $20,000.
4 locations. There's more than one camera at the location.
Okay, 4 locations, my mistake.
Directions, but
Okay.
yes, sir, 4 locations, correct.
But the ask is for 10 additional cameras at
So flock
$20,000.
cameras, it's a different one. It's not the same ones we have now. They're a little easier to install, not quite as expensive. And what we're wanting to do is put these in other strategic areas in the city, obviously, where we have high crime issues, property crime, things like that, and to widen the net, if you will, of this fantastic technology that has really become a game changer for law enforcement.
Thank you, sir.
Thanks, sir. Councilman Minor, does anyone have any questions about what he was just talking about? Specifically about that? If you don't mind, since he's already up here.
Director Robinson, with respect to Councilmember Hypes, don't we have a license plate reader program that was free through the schools that somebody else was paying for? And how many do you intend to use of the free cameras before we allocate any dollar associated to 10? And why would you?
Right. So those LPRs you're referring to, yes, you approved recently school zone cameras. And so in each of our school zones, which we started getting those in place, and of course COVID came along and stopped that, so we don't have that completely. I think we ended up with 4 schools, but in each of our school zones, we'll have speed cameras, all right, in each school zone. Those cameras also have LPRs in them. So yes, and so that's a part of those cameras.
How many will you have in total?
I think it was 12, I want to say, 12 total as far as school locations. Don't quote me on that, I can't remember for sure, but 11 or 12, I think.
Call it 10.
Right, but those were all obviously on school, in school zones.
Okay, thank you.
Councilman Binder.
Director Harris. Just first got to start out again. I appreciate all the work that you and staff has done and all the department. I think I've looked at some of the other cities and governments around, and we're kind of first ahead. So you're in uncharted territory trying to make best guesses. So you're doing a fantastic job. I hope on the revenue projections. I know I've been on that pretty hard over the past couple of weeks, but just as we get closer to budget time and we're seeing where things go and what other governments are doing, we can just be open to seeing where we are on that. Walk me back through, so you said the $4 million going from the capital, unallocated capital fund, moving it back to the general fund, is that correct?
There was a transfer on pay, if you look in the
$3 million
document of $3 million, I want to say it's 189, or, we go on page 58. There's a transfer down at the bottom called Recurring Capital Program. It's the $3,189,000. That transfer is paid for, it's hard to tell, but you got to know where its source is literally the property tax and all the revenues of the general fund. That is a line item of $3.189 million that we transfer over. We also transfer over the general fund surplus of fund balance that we want to put towards capital. But this 3.189 is an operating line funded with operations that was going over to the capital project funds to fund a lot of our recurring capital milling and resurfacing and all that. When it's over there in this document now, it's over there with, and it falls to the bottom line there where they're sitting on $4 million because about the same time we were producing the budget, you put the brakes on a lot of current projects and put that money, you could say, to use to fund a lot of the recurring. So there's $8.7 million of things being spent on. We could bring that $3 million of the one, I think we rounded to $3 million back and leaving the $189,000 over there. The capital project fund will have $8.7 million of capital projects, and $1 million of unallocated, available for a next capital project spend. And then the general fund now will put that 3 million. If you look above it, there's a non-allocated reserve of 1.1, a little light when you think about some of the revenue projections that may have changed in the last few weeks. So that will now bring that reserve, operating fund, general fund reserve of over 4 million, 4.1 million.
So,
Does that make sense?
and before I ask my next question on there, I'm for the Quint. I think it needs to get done. It's not a nice to have, it's a must have. We just got to talk about how we're going to pay it. If we were to take that 3 million and then, as Councilmember Hype suggested, putting that towards the Quint, the 600, that's an operational cost, correct? Not a capital. So it'd be kind of coming out of what we need to be doing for capital budgets, meaning that we put the 3 million in there and hopefully we won't need to use it and we can put it back halfway through or a year later.
It's all prioritization of those dollars, correct.
So my concern is as we're keeping the powder dry, I still want to be able to have an understanding of what, once, if we don't have to use it, we can reallocate it back to the sides of capital projects in there, in that. So just want everyone to be aware of that. One thing, a couple exhibits that I've asked the past few times is the T-SPLOS and bond projects. Really, I think this council needs to know where we were before this happened. We were unsure how everything was going to get paid for from commitments and bonds and T-SPLOS projects. I think we need to figure out where we are, and we may not know how to get there right now because there's so much turbulence, but at least I'd like it documented as an exhibit of, okay, this is what we need to address. Another one is back to the operating side on the personnel. You guys have done a fantastic job, of how do we take care of personnel with doing payroll freezes. You guys, departments have taken and saying we're going to do freezes on new hires for empty positions. One thing that the Quint, we are going to be adding that in there with 6 personnel. So I guess what I'm asking for is a 2-year forecast or just a short-term forecast of here's all the operating initiative personnel-wise that we're really adding in, because we're also talking about a compensation plan, which I think is great and needs to get done. Potential annual bonus and this. I just would like to see it all in one paper of year 1, year 2 of how we're bringing it all in line, because we're talking about $1 million additional operating of growing our government during this time. And I think some of it needs to get done, but we need to look big picture of what that is. So I appreciate you, again, taking the time. I know I've been pestering you with questions, but you've been good.
Before we go ask for any other feedback, I think it's a good opportunity for me to explain how we got here and all this stuff and to give Tom credit. When we met in our retreat back in January, things looked pretty good. We thought we were going to have our first normal budget cycle, and then by the time we got to actually presenting a budget, we had a pandemic that had shut down the entire economy of our nation. So in discussions previously for the initial recommended budget, it was clear because of the crisis that was going on, instability as far as revenues and not too much instability as far as expenses go, the sense of council was we needed to keep as much, as you said, powder dry. We needed to keep flexibility to keep us from having to lay people off, to keep us from having to lower the standards of service for public safety in every department in this city. And so as Tom and I worked with you and our department heads over the past few months, I tried to find as many ways for us to increase the flexibility, because 3 months from now, we'll know more. 6 months from now, we'll know a lot more. And right now, we're just trying to do the best we can, and thank God that Tom has tremendous experience and a track record of doing a really good job of finding that needle in the haystack of the best path forward. But when I put together a recommendation. We really were just keeping money that staff and our council had identified, pulling it back from having it obligated to specific projects. All of them were good projects. They wouldn't have been obligated in the first place if we didn't think they were necessary. But they were things that if we have to cut, if we have to hold off, these are things we'll do. And so at the time, we pulled it back, put it into the unallocated capital, because we know we're going to have shortages on some of the capital projects that we want to get done. And after discussions specifically with Councilman Height about the Quint and the LPRs, the LPRs, if we're going to spend $20,000, that's a great way to spend it. The Quint, as far as the discussion that went into my thought process, was the Quint has to be done. Milton is pulling their fire truck, their ladder truck, out of our fire station. It's been a great partnership over the years, but because they were keeping a ladder truck in our fire station right down the road, we were able to help partner with them, and they were covering some of our area with us. When they pull that out in about a year and a half, I believe, we've got to have that same level of service, and so we've got to replace that. To me, that's a got to. There might be some other cuts, there might be some, so in my mind, regardless of whether it was on an unallocated capital or whether we move it to the operational, we're going to spend that whole money. And Tom's budget thought was, it might be hard to come up with $900,000, so let's go ahead and put $300,000 aside. And that's the discussion we're having now. I think there's validity to it. I think flexibility is also good. As long as we know we're going to pay for it one way or another, I'm not really going to put a stake in the ground over whether we have to designate it now or not. But the fact is, if we designate it now, then that's $300,000 we don't have to spend on something we may need this year rather than next year. But it's a good discussion to have, and I encourage all of the council to think about it. But I want to give Tom tremendous credit, because after having some conversations with council members at the dais, I went back to Tom and we were talking about, Tom, I didn't really have a stake in the ground over this or this. All I'm trying to provide is the most flexibility for us moving forward. And as it turned out, Tom called me the next morning. He said, you kept me up all night, because all I kept thinking about was you wanted me to come up with more flexibility. Because for those of you that aren't accountants, the challenge was we had moved it into an account that is capital, which means it's spent that year, not recurring. When you move something to an operational expense, it's something you intend from here on out. And that changes a lot of budgeting things. $100,000 this year is different than $100,000 for the next 40 years. And so Tom called me and said he had really been given a lot of thought, and there wasn't any reason we couldn't move it, retaining that flexibility, because we always could have taken it out of unallocated and spent it operationally. But I think, to his credit, he heard council and he came up with a solution. It didn't surprise me, but I wanted to give him credit for that. So I think what he's proposing is good. Personally, I don't feel strongly one way or another about the Quint. We've got to come up with the money when we come up with it. So if we want to keep that $300,000 flexible in this budget, I'm fine with that. Just know we have to do that at the time that it needs to be done. So that's where we are. Any other comments or questions about the budget or concerns? Councilwoman Richard.
This is not actually for Tom, but it's for Director Robison. Just a little bit more on the LPR program. The school zone program that we implemented mid-year of this year, those cameras are operating a certain time before school and after school. Is that correct?
The speed?
The speed.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes.
Correct.
So when school is closed, summers and, off hours. Pandemics. Are those cameras operating at all?
The LPRs can still, they can operate 24 hours. It's on the same component, but it's a different part of the component. So the LPRs can run 24 hours a day.
And so are you getting feed from those LPRs during?
Again, we've only got, I think, 3, maybe 4, I can't remember the number before all this happened, up and running. So yes, ma'am, the ones that were running, we were getting some data from that as well. I couldn't tell you what we've gotten from that as far as the benefit goes. Mainly what I've gotten data-wise is from the Georgia Power cameras, but they were very early on in the process of getting them up and running, so they weren't up long. Even the ones that were up were not up long at all.
Right, for any kind of.
A good read of data for that.
Okay, all right, thank you. I just needed some clarity on that. Thank you.
Anything else from council this evening? Regarding the budget, that is. Thank you, Director Harris. I appreciate it. So that'll wrap up the workshops for this evening. Ladies and gentlemen, we do have public comment available for those of you that haven't taken advantage to this point. Now's your opportunity to come forward and speak for 3 minutes about anything you have on your mind. Seeing no one coming forward, we'll go ahead and close public comment. Do we have any reports from council this evening? Councilman Merkel.
It's not a report, but it didn't get brought up earlier. Just a quick touch back on the skateboard. We did a retreat one year, and I'm going to go research it, and I'm thinking it was Chattanooga. It made adjustments to the surface of certain sidewalks or parking lots that discouraged. It didn't work. You could walk on it, you could run on it, you could ride a bike on it, you couldn't skateboard on it. So I'm going to get with Pete and see if we can go back and figure out what that was, and maybe there's some opportunities in certain parts of the city that maybe you don't skateboard on grass, so maybe we change some surfaces that would change behaviors. So,
that's interesting. I know I was in Macon a while back, and they have rumble strips and.
Is that it? Because we were there. We did a retreat there one year too. Yeah. Anyways, that's
one.
I
don't know. I don't know that I've seen them like that, but it may be an opportunity.
We're not just walking away from this. Okay, that's all I'm saying. This is going to be not only an ongoing discussion, but look at other options besides laws that can change behavior. So.
Councilwoman Richard.
To actually follow up on what Councilmember Merkel is talking about, when the Witt family was speaking to us about their concerns and the lack of parks that we currently have to support this particular activity, I just want to make it clear, the city has never received any sort of petition from skateboarders. I know you alluded to the fact that there was a petition, but I had conversations with Director Rogers, our Parks and Rec director. It may have circulated online, but it never made its way to the city. And also, we had a Wills Park master plan that was developed over the last several years, and we had numerous public outreach and asking residents for input on what they wanted to see in Wills Park, and skateboarding was not ever a topic of discussion. However, we do have a concept master plan for our Union Hill Park, which is in Windward area, and in that concept plan, there is an area identified as a potential skate park area. So it's a concept plan. We haven't fleshed it out any further, but I thought it was important to make sure you understood that in all the public outreach we did for Wills Park, skateboarding was not something that came up as a priority. So I just wanted to make sure that you were clear on that. And then as a reports item, I do have some phenomenal news from Mr. Ben Kern, who is in our Community Development Department, just received his master's from Johns Hopkins University, and he has received his master as Applied Science in Spatial Analysis for Public Health. So that is a pretty significant accomplishment. Just want to recognize him for that.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it's great. Thank you.
Any other reports? Oh, Bob. My apologies. Mr. Regas is our city administrator and give us a report on the update of reopening.
City operations, yeah.
City operations.
And Ben is a great guy, great young man. Yeah, good to have him on board. We're doing well. We opened up tennis courts, pickleball, athletic fields, Waggy World, Dog Park. All outdoor restrooms, we opened those up on Friday, and everything went very well. No incidents, everybody's behaving, you know. The next big thing with Parks and Rec is to open up the community center, the Art Center, and the Wills Park Rec Center next Tuesday. And I don't think there'll be much activity going on in there, but we'll be opening them up. Staff is working in there now, and they can help with online registrations and doing those kinds of things. So going well there. 911 operations are still well below last year. The same week, 1 year ago, down 27%. And if you think about the numbers, 731 calls a year ago to 532 calls this last week. So you think about that, about 100 or so a day.
I don't want to interrupt, but I do want to mention, we have to keep that in perspective. Our daytime population, Monday through Friday, is about half what it was 3 months ago. So
Right.
we can do better than a 38% reduction, darn it.
Yeah, that is a reflection of traffic issues and other things that are not here yet. Court, you know, they've had to reschedule the court dates 3 times, but now they're raring to go on June 13th when they come out of the state hold on when they can have court cases, community development. They continue to do well. You know, had 371 inspections last week, issued 71 permits, took in $67,000 in impact fees. So, you know, good thing is developers and builders continue to want to build and develop in Alpharetta. It's a good sign. Public Works, we have more people in the office, 8 now. We still have 13 teleworking. Rec and Parks, that's where we have the biggest change in folks who are on admin leave. They're now mostly back at work because we're cranking back up the summer programs. Camps start June 1st. Registration is going well. So, and all the cities around us, they're on about the same pace as we are as far as summer camps. Some open up next Tuesday. Most open up June 1st, some June 15th, but most right where we are and as far as timing with the camps. You know, of course, public safety, the 225 sworn personnel, they keep working their shifts and doing what they do so well. We have about 15 civilians there, and they are mostly all back in the office now. So, you know, we opened up the lobby of headquarters this morning, and that went well also. So no surprises, no problems. So we're doing well, Mayor. Be happy to answer any questions.
Councilman Binder?
You guys have done a great job opening up. If one thing I could say with summer camps coming up, I know a lot of parents, there's a lot of unknown, so, and I know there's been a lot of preparations on how it's going to go. Maybe we can start on Facebook just doing that, because parents are trying to figure out, keep them at home, find somewhere else because they're doing lower, and then change it to that. But just with a week to go for summer camps, so that would be helpful.
We'll keep getting the word out there on that.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you, Bob. So if there's no, Councilman Merkel.
For those of you that might not have heard, Miss Kathy Cook's birthday was yesterday. So we're not going to discuss numbers, but if you didn't get a chance to, maybe on the way out, wish her just a little happy birthday. We're not going to sing to you. I'm not going to do that to you, but wish her one on the way out.
60 great years. Well,
Oh, my God. And here's Councilmember Mitchell's last day on the job.
Any other reports? Well, I will just share one piece of good news, and, you know, it's nice to be back in these chambers. It's nice to see our community coming forward with business proposals and the economy starting to get back and all of us trying to figure out how to recover what's used to be so easy and normal, and I appreciate all of you that came out here this evening. Part of that recovery, I'm excited to say that this morning, our Public Safety Department employees began antibody testing over at Station 81. And so with the support of council and the staff, what we have done as the city is there's a lot of coronavirus testing available now. It took a long time for that to scale up, but now there is free testing available from Fulton County over off North Point Parkway, and there's plenty of free testing if you think you may have the virus or if you want to know if you have the virus. But as we start growing back into the new normal, one of the things that we need a better sense of, we need more information about is how many people actually had the disease and never knew it. Because as we hear more about the asymptomatic cases and how it was able to spread, many people have had it and had no clue. And in areas in New York where they've done this antibody testing, they have been surprised to find numbers of 15-20%, and most of those people never even knew that they had it. And so as we try to provide the information to get a better sense of, okay, we know the cases that we've identified, but how widespread was it? How much immunity may have already been built out in our community? Antibody testing is the new wave, and that's where we'll get that information. And so because our frontline public safety employees throughout this crisis have been dealing with people, with the public in general, but specifically going out and performing CPR on people who may have turned out to have had coronavirus, we have, as a city, decided to offer them antibody testing. It began today. We should start getting some of that information. We will not know individual results or names, but we may have a sense of, out of the 200 employees we have in public safety, how many were exposed. Hopefully it wasn't many, but if that's the case, then we'll know that the procedures, the policies that we have in place have been effective. And so hopefully we'll eventually be able to find partners and expand that program. And I believe there's a lot of people in the community, major employers, that would like to have access to that. So I think it's just another one of these steps as the green shoots start to come back up from what has been the near past to the future that we face. This community's doing awesome. You know, a lot of good people made a lot of good decisions over the last few months, and we avoided a major crisis, what could have been even worse. But it's nice to see people willing to show up and speak on behalf of themselves and this community. It's nice to be back in these chambers under the new reality and with all the seats that are blocked off so that we can do this as safely as possible. But we're making the turn, and I appreciate all of you being a part of that. Appreciate my council members' support in a time that has just been bizarre for all of us and the staff that have carried us through. Congratulations to everyone, and please have a good and safe evening. This meeting is now adjourned.